Well, welcome to the Energizing America podcast, where we talk all things energy while leading in our business, community, and life.
Well, it's interesting because when you go into business like you did, almost by chance, you're just out doing what you love, and success starts building upon itself, and all of a sudden you see other people winning, so you get this rejuvenated drive to keep making more investments, to have more people keep on winning, and all of a sudden this thing just grows and grows, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, now what? How am I ever gonna? What do I do with this thing? Because it's really not mine. It's everyone on the teams. And so yeah, exit strategy becomes a big deal. And the whole thing is, Ryan, how cool is that you're sitting in an entrepreneur class and you hear about how many entrepreneurs fail, and you get your feet wet and end up as an entrepreneur once you have some experience behind you and own your own business. I have a love-hate relationship with those stats that people throw out, because the love part is it's true. A lot of entrepreneurs fail. The hate part of it is that there's some people that won't go put their foot there.
Yeah.
That should, and go experience that same journey. You know, even if it fails and their investment isn't that large, that's okay. You know, I think sometimes the context is missing as to what constitutes a failure and how large that failure really can be. If you're an entrepreneur and you go start something, you can back out pretty quickly before you're too far upside down. Now, if you push through those upside downs, like you guys had to in 2016 when the market slowed down, or 2020 had to have been brutal in your business, you push through those things, and then in 2022 you have a big win and you own the business, right? So try not to pull out too soon, but recognize the fact that, while it's true some entrepreneurs may fail, there are plenty that succeed.
Yeah.
And if we focus on the positives of that, a lot more people would maybe be willing to, and maybe even define the word entrepreneurship, Ryan, because I had similar. A family friend owned a business, blah, blah, blah. I get involved, and next thing you know, own the business, and it's got, similar amount of employees. But it wasn't because I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just loved having the ability to move quickly and make decisions. And so you can be an entrepreneur within an organization and have a really big voice, just like you did in 2006. I guarantee you there's people on your team within LSC right now that you already either have in your head or know on paper that that's an entrepreneur coming up the chain, and he's going to run this certain part of my business at some point.
Yeah, we call that intrapreneurship. So a pretty well-researched term, right? And so right now we have a handful of things we do. We call them strategic imperatives. And it's just funny you mentioned this. In strategic imperative actions, these are the things that we will get done over a certain period of time. It's critical that we do. And one of them this year is to cultivate on intrapreneurship. People that want to stay with the business, build within the business, and in themselves build a career and, reputation in whatever success might look like in that journey or process. And that's where you kind of get the everybody wins result, including our customers.
Yeah, and I think if you're, depending on what industries you're in, there's so much solopreneurship going on right now with the door dashing and the Ubering and everything else, and it's an interesting phenomenon. And a lot of folks are like, well, I want that flexibility, I want that ability to do whatever I want when I want, and then when they go on the vacation, they realize that there's no income coming in, and they're like, oh, wait, maybe this isn't for me. Again, those same things can be found within an organization, and possibly you can save yourself from some of the big challenges of going out and starting your own thing. And so as you look back over the last 15 years of your journey, well, almost 20 years, Ryan, that's sickening. That's crazy. 19 years.
Yeah, hard to remember. I was the youngest by far when I started. And
yeah.
I still feel that's who I am, even though I don't think I am anymore.
But when you think back through that journey, what was like one of the biggest challenges that you would have never expected? You go to college, you learn about business, you're starting to get exposed to it. You mentioned the cash flow piece of it. I do think for me, that was really difficult to get my head around. I went to school for accounting, so I thought I knew numbers and life was great. And then, we go to work, same thing. You start with 5 employees, all of a sudden you got 12. Your payroll goes from 100,000. Now sometimes it'll start touching $1 million a week that you're paying out, because you know what overtime is in our industry, and you don't get to get that money for 30 days. You get to invoice it, and then a lot of oil and gas, just by sheer nature, it's net 60, so you're pushed out. You might be 90 days before you start to see some of that investment back. And that can be a little bit of a mental game, because what if somebody goes bankrupt in that process? How do I deal with that? Lots of risk. But beyond cash, what's another challenge that maybe you didn't foresee that you experienced, and maybe you didn't even realize it was a challenge until it was in the rearview mirror?
That's a great question. I like to think about the gains over time as opposed to sort of what needs to happen still. I think we've made a lot of gains. The cash thing, to me, like especially after buying the business back, I was really focused on that probably every day. Not in an unhealthy way, but really focused on it just because there are lives and families at stake. And there's a lot of, I won't even call it pressure, but we need to be certain that we'll be okay. And in tandem, I would say I probably had 6 parachutes planned. And so it's like I'm reaching out, having conversations, sort of if-thens. Listen, I'm not looking to sell equity, for example. However, or my business partner and I, we're not really looking to externally, but what might that look like? So in the event that you get in trouble, these families and people that depend on you and customers aren't affected significantly or negatively, or you have to go through something like layoffs, which we don't do. We don't lay our employees off or investing in their future. And so, I'd say now we're pretty well set up, not even from a cash perspective, but from a who's looking at what perspective. And so it's about, I think for me, getting people that you trust in the right roles with the right responsibilities, paying attention to these things. So I don't pay as much attention to that anymore. Now it's really focused on how do we elevate, how do we improve, how do we do better, whatever that might look like. To me, the biggest challenge I would say that was the most surprising was how you mentioned the speed of change, and that was an allure to being an entrepreneur is you can decide you want to do something and you can do it. I think the hardest part for me has been probably 2 things I'll come up with. One is just transformation. So no matter what that is, whether it's a single process or engagement within the organization, you'd like to think, okay, here are the 5 biggest areas of issues that our employees are saying are issues from their perspective. I want to fix that because I want people to want to be here because I think they'll do better work for our customers and work together more effectively, and they'll stay longer. They'll choose to be here. And so we just got to make these changes. And then even if you make those changes, it still takes time for people to absorb that the change happened and that's no longer an issue. You'd like to think, well, we fixed that, but it really takes people, the stigma stays there for like 2 years. It stays there for a while. So yeah, I want to move quickly as well. I like that. And sometimes I have to temper that where it's like, okay, this is going to take a little bit of time to play out. And what you can get in with the trap, I've found, is if you say, all right, here's where we want to go with our business. Here are some of the things to make that happen that we need to focus on. And you even identify what does good look like and what changes can we affect to make that good come to fruition. And then you do that. And then 6 months later, you're not getting the results or the outcomes you were looking for. It's very tempting to say, that didn't work, let's do something else. That didn't work, let's do something else. And so that can be quite disruptive and actually hurt you or set you back. And so I'd say for me, probably the biggest learning has been that sometimes things take time. And it's about persistence and patience, but also making wise decisions on the front end, doing your due diligence and thorough research and planning. And then sometimes, even if you do the greatest thing, but you fail to communicate it in the right way, people still get frustrated, even though your intent was noble. And so we've learned a lot about, or I've certainly learned a lot about communication and how to do that effectively. And I still make mistakes all the time. And sometimes I was about to make a mistake the other day and somebody said, well, wait a minute, aren't we supposed to do it this way? It's like, oh, I learned that lesson like 10 years ago. And yeah, I completely forgot. You're right. Probably the second thing I would say is just, and this is what I'm wrestling with a lot right now, is where to apply my time. I mean, I mentioned being addicted to customer growth success and then employee growth success, which drives customer growth and success. And now it's probably more of a transformation for myself. Like, okay, I need to evolve. I need to up my game. I'm not sure that'll ever end. But now I need to do more research. This isn't technical training. This is technical training that serves our customers. It's in a different way. And so now focused on people, process, systems, the function of the organization, and knowing I can't do everything. If you're going to be the hero, you'll fail. And so it's how do we get the right people in the right roles to work on the right things to help grow the organization, and how do we continually improve the services we're offering at the same time. So my personal journey has been more on that. And one of the things that I've needed to focus on is where I spend my time and my brain power and my energy. we still fill out timesheets. I'm like, I'll put the hours on there, but then I'm at home waking up in the middle of the night thinking about what I need to do. And it's not that I can't shut it off. It's just that I'm really eager to do something. And what I've realized more recently is that I wanted to identify my strengths. So right now I'm leading the organization. I'm doing a lot of different things. Where do I really add value, and where are there those areas where there's somebody who can do it better than I can, and they'll enjoy doing that because it's in their strength zone. And then how do I get them empowered to do it without being a micromanager? So I've been spending a lot of time thinking sort of there. Okay, there's this little bit of thing that I do that I just love. Every time I do, I get energy from it rather than giving energy to it. And really saying, well, that's what I should do for this business entirely. And so how do we get the other things offloaded in a way that somebody's excited about those and doing them because it'll have real impacts on how our organization functions?
It's interesting you say that because I struggle with similar, especially when you've touched every area of the business. Like you can turn on your computer and you have a day's worth of work. It's just that easy as the leader, right? You can turn it on, open your email, and there's 100 items you could do. And then when you look around your organization and you've got all these incredible people working as hard as they are, one of them could do it even better than you, but you're like, man, Bill's so busy. He's been working a lot. I'll just take that one and go take care of it. And then all of a sudden you get to the end of the day and you're like, I actually didn't do anything I enjoy doing. I just spent time helping take tasks from people, which is important and what a leader needs to do, but possibly the business suffered because of it. The same skills that you brought to the table back in 2006 and probably especially through the teens, the 2015 to 2020 era, are what caused LSC, not individually caused, but collectively, it's what propelled LSC forward. And now all of a sudden, as you're running a business, you're managing all these other things that you don't even maybe find tons of value. And like you say, someone else can do it great, but you have like this weird guilt feeling of where you should be in the organization. And yeah, that is an incredible, difficult thing that I would have never expected to find myself in. When we became employee owned, especially, I spent probably 3 months like just spinning, wondering where's my value? What am I supposed to be doing? How do I even contribute? And then finally it's like, knock it off, get up and go to work and give it your best, whatever that looked like yesterday or 2 years ago or 4 years ago. And then it kind of brings me to the first thing you commented about, which is I think just a need for a deep commitment to work through all of those. Like you maybe didn't communicate something properly, right? So now you had to learn about how effective communication and how do I do that better? And that's just kind of a drag because it's like, can't we all just be like, understand we're all busy and I didn't mean to do that? Or maybe it's, you failed on a process out on a project and you caused a project to go a little south and you didn't mean to, but you got to push through that. You got to show up at the client's office, have a good, tough conversation with a handshake, get your, hand slapped a little bit and prove that commitment by going out and fixing whatever it was. That I would have never guessed how deeply that commitment has to run in order to see something through. Because like you said, it takes time. And so a lot of folks, when we start something, we want immediate success, especially in today's world. Well, you got to redefine what some success is going to look like. Today, we're just going to communicate what the challenge is. Next week, we're going to brainstorm on a solution, right? And maybe in 3 months, we're actually going to start implementing a solution. And in a year or two, we're going to look back and say, we can't even believe we had that issue. But that's a lot of commitment to wait that long and to see it through. And then to end up in a challenging position personally to say, well, where do I fit in on this now? But I think if we talk to other business leaders, as I have, you find out that's a fairly normal trajectory of a business. And a lot of us end up in that spot where we're going, okay, wait a second, time to step back. Just like I expect my employees to show up or our team members, we all expect this of each other to show up and give it our all today. The same is expected of me. And so just because I'm the leader doesn't mean I get to like sit in my office and like pout about, where's my value and what am I supposed to be doing? No, I'm equally responsible just like everyone else. If my title is the president or the CEO or the CFO or the field technician, we all have certain duties that fall within that, and you better go execute them. That's what your duty is. But it can be a really odd spot to be when you've rode that journey as you have. Tell me a little bit about the folks around you. Who's been the most impactful? I mean, obviously this founder.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, I don't know that I can answer that question. It's every employee. I went and met somebody new recently and had a great conversation about them and their journey and switching industries and coming into our business. And I had a great conversation with them about sort of the things they loved about the last job they were in. They were there for like 10 years. And the things that frustrated them, asked them for an honest assessment about how we're doing in their first 90 days and what things we can improve. And I'll say that was a really impactful, engaging conversation. And I don't know that I can, and that was recent. I don't know that I can put that ahead or behind. It's sort of like the cumulative effect of everyone. And I can't pin it down to any single individual. But what I do know is that I'm certainly stronger because of them. And I'd like to think that they're stronger because of each other and me.
Yeah.
Even individuals who have left and are no longer with the organization, and I still look back at all the learning I had from them, even the ones that might not even got along with very well at times. So I don't know. I don't think there's a single individual. And I think what you realize is it takes a family. It takes and not just by the way our employees, but the relatives of our employees supporting them, especially in a job that requires a lot of travel because the infrastructure we support is dispersed. It's around the nation. And so, travel can be difficult on relationships, family. And so to the parents of those college students that supported them and went and got their mail from their apartment, that's hugely impactful in that employee's ability to deliver work for our customers. To the family members that tolerated and supported somebody's career ambitions and growth and work in this field, a lot of appreciation goes there. Our banking relationships, our brokers around property and casualty and health benefits or insurance, legal. We've got a legal partner who's helped me in so many ways. I mentioned it like, we bought the business back, but that was like a year and a half of no sleep. I'll just zoom through that really quick. But there was a lot of things I didn't know how to do, and I didn't know how to do. It was like we were like 2 weeks from close, and somebody that's pretty experienced on the seller side said, "Hey, you have something called a TSA or Transition Services Agreement, where a lot of the things that we have running for the business, we agree, or the seller's going to agree that they'll continue. There's no just cut off of these services we're getting. Things like payroll. We don't have the means to pay payroll yet. They're going to continue paying payroll, but we have to pay them. We have to pay that, and we'll have to pay them for helping with that until we can get off on our own." I had to get a lot of education around what that meant. And, this individual said, "Hey, you can't contract away through a transition services agreement your property and casualty insurance. You have to have your own insurance." I was like, maybe it was like 3 weeks before close. And I was like, I did not know that, but it makes sense. And so now we're on the phone calling brokers to say, we need insurance in 3 weeks. Got to go to the market and get it for a 300-person organization. And, we didn't get the greatest deal. I'll tell you that year one. But you have just an example, a lot of things that I learned. But the biggest lesson I learned, I would say, was it was really a comforting memory. It was when, there was a lot of energy expended to try and, really confidentially pull off this acquisition and then, a buyout of the business we love, and then message it and everything. And it's like after day one of that or day zero, it's like, whew, I need a break. Like I'm exhausted from this. And so you kind of go reset. And I'm sitting at home thinking, all right, what are the things now we have to really do? So now that we did this and we didn't know if we'd pull off this miracle, there's a lot of work to do. It's not time to rest. It's time to roll up the sleeves. And I had a really hard time doing that. And so it took me a couple of days, and then I kind of called a meeting, and I got some of our other senior team members in the room, and I said, all right, everybody, there's a lot of work ahead of us, and I've got a list of like 7 things we have to do. We got to do this, we got to do that, we got to do that. I need help with this, I need help with that. And one of them looked at me and was like, Ryan, we already started all that. I was like, wait, what? We already started that? Oh yeah, we started that, all that. We've got 3 of those done already. And I was like, all right, we're going to be okay. You have amazing people around you. So to answer the question, who's been the most impactful? There's people, our customers are some folks that have retired from our business that taught me a lot. Every employee we've hired, pretty much, or many of them, it's just, I can't pin it to one.
Well, I think that's phenomenal in so many ways, because just as a life lesson, don't follow a person, right? Follow ideas and follow those types of things, of which there's all kinds of incredible people behind. Because embrace uniqueness. Like, we all bring our own little gift to this world, and go be you, and then as a result, lean into all these different people around you, and you get a much broader perspective on how things can run. And I had a little mental spin out about 2-3 years ago, listening to podcasts and listening to books, and pretty soon, like, I'm on my run with my friend, and all we're talking about is one author and how he says you should do this one thing. Well, that's cute for him, and that's what works for him. But instead, I have found way more success in, like, listening to all of it. And usually, what you're finding, you just kind of need to keep, like, being recentered. You don't need to change who you are. You just constantly got to be recentered. And I think that's an important lesson about life, that it's usually not one person. It can be. And certainly there's certain areas of the business or of your life where you think of one person. When I think of treating people or serving others, I think of my grandmother. When I'm out working really hard, I think of my dad's commitment to just doing a good job, and, like, no matter what the job is, right? When I'm out trying to motivate my team members or our team to get behind a project, I can think of somebody else, or a new customer that's just tough to nail down. I think, well, wait a second, my sales guy just nailed down a customer last week. I can do it too. So I think there's these different ones that impact. You said something, though, about your broker. And I think this is also important to remember, that as we're in business, it goes beyond just us. Like, it's beyond the team. We're affected by clients, and we're affecting our clients. We're affected by even people like brokers, and we're affecting their life. And that's been a really interesting thing in my head, like sitting down with brokers trying to find property casualty. We operate in similar industry. I don't do as much professional services as LSC does. So I would imagine your insurance is in the millions of dollars.
Yeah, I won't say, but it's more than is reasonable.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Well, you probably have the conversation like I did with our insurance company last month, that nice try, but 5 years in that I've had this one company, you've paid out 25% of what I've paid you. I think this is time for a little reset, right? And as a result, I can sometimes feel really infuriated with those folks, and, like, just look at them as a big fat expense on my P&L that I'd rather not have. And I have to step back and say, well, wait a second, they are a partner and they are providing value. And that's not just the brokers, right? It goes down to your CPA, it goes down to your banking relationships, all of it collectively.
And you use the right word there, partner. I mean, to me, found that communicating outcomes and then talking about the barriers to those outcomes with them, because they're professionals. We've had a lot of success, thankfully, with specifically our property and casualty broker, where we were able to explain what the desired outcomes were. And they were able to, in return, tell us, well, if that's what you want, here are the things we would recommend you focus on. And then it's kind of back on us to take action. And so we've done those things, and then they've delivered the commitments and the results. Like, actually, it's just funny, it comes up. We had a meeting yesterday with our property and casualty broker about our renewal. I said we closed September 1st of 2022, which means that our insurance is renewing September 1st this year. It's annual, right? And they gave us great news. And I'll tell you that our outcome this year, moving into 2026, or the end of this year and into next year, is better insurance for less cost. And I don't think there's a lot of companies doing that right now. So they're absolutely partners, and they affect us, they affect us immensely. They have a direct effect on our employees and our customers, and our ability to invest in tools, technology, things, and in, heaven forbid, if things go wrong, they're there to help us through those circumstances as well. So we try and treat them that way, as extensions of ourselves. And I don't know how I missed it, but it's almost like people ask you, who do you thank for this? And you go through the list, you're like, how did I forget? I have to mention my family, say who's been influential. The entirety of my family, we have a very close relationship with all family members, really. I'm blessed there and lucky there, but I'd say every one of my family members has been massively influential and supportive of me over the years, even if they have no idea what I do.
Well, I know that's what my wife sometimes like. What do you actually do? The thing is about family, especially in a traveling business. You mentioned how your employees, you owe a debt of gratitude to their families, and I've seen your social or your blog posts on your website where you have the picnics going on with your team members, and I think that's so important to recognize what those people go through. And the community around us oftentimes doesn't even understand what goes into infrastructure.
Yeah,
and it's not because they're being against it. They're ignorant to what goes into the infrastructure that they so heavily rely on. Like, how many people actually know that a pipeline has cathodic protection and all this coding testing that's going on annually, or whatever the DOT requirements are, or federal requirements are, or customer standards? They have no idea that exists, right? All they may see is some negative press about the said pipeline. They don't get to see this that goes into it. And I think the same thing can be for our families that work in these industries. They're just seeing that dad has to leave tonight and it's Sunday night, and I'm not going to see him until Friday night. But the correlation can be missed. That's why I have natural gas at home, and I can turn on my fireplace in the middle of winter, is because dad just hit the road. And everyone is playing a part in that in this industry. Where do you think, you mentioned investments, the ability to make more investments in your business with the right partners and so on, that you can keep costs down and keep on going with the LSC. What's your vision, or where do you think this industry is headed? It's specific to oil and gas.
Boy, that's a deep question. Well, I'm not an expert by any means, but I know some people who really are, and I feel like I've learned hopefully some things from them over the years. I almost have to back up, like, to explain why I think it's headed there. First and foremost, to me, there's a direct correlation between energy and things like education, healthcare, food security. And in this country, we have a very strong network of reliable, affordable, secure, and safe energy delivery systems. And I think a lot of it has to do with the men and women that work really hard to ensure that that's happening. And so that's what I see every day. I see people working really hard, a lot of sweat equity going into making sure these systems are safely executed. So they're safely operated, designed, constructed, operated, maintained, retired, and or replaced. And I think there, like you said, there's a big disconnect in the general public about what these systems do or how they function, or their track record of safety, which is quite good relative to other means. And then second to that, how that correlates to things like air quality, and again, education, healthcare, food. So if you look across the world globally, I like to think of, it's not like I have a very sort of anti-NIMBY perspective. Like the environment matters greatly to me, but not the environment in my backyard or even where we live. There's one atmosphere in the earth, and it's important we take care of it. I think if you look at energy-rich countries, let's call them the established countries, you see that the lights are on, they have safe, reliable energy, and affordable, and their air quality is our air quality is a lot higher, right? A lot better. And then a lot of countries that are still, burning wood and dung or manure for heat and cooking, have generally poorer air quality, and you call those, the emerging and developing economies or countries of the world. To me, there's an immense need to safely and responsibly deliver cleaner forms of energy. In this case, cleaner than dung and wood, and by cleaner I mean less emissions to these countries, and in these countries, they also, in doing that, you bring things like education, healthcare, and food. And so I think what we'll see, hopefully, if I'd like to see, is continued development and expansion and in cultivating the resources and sort of all of the above, which includes even cleaner forms of energy. So I mean, if you kind of rank it from clean, you look at oil and coal, high emissions, high density, and then you look at things like natural gas and nuclear power, less emissions, high density. And then you look at things like solar and wind, which, those are renewable, but the equipment is not, right? Solar panels, batteries, wind turbines, definitely not renewable, and will kind of be here forever type of thing. But that being said, emission is very little. And so, to me, that's a fast-growing area, but even the fast-growing area, the other forms are also growing. So natural gas, oil, and coal are also growing as well. And that really is to keep up with demand and these countries emerging and developing, trying to get access to energy, I think for very noble reasons. Certainly there's a lot of policy changes and seesawing happening, but the reality is, I think you'll continue to see investment in terms of sort of there's a massive disruptor to that we can get into as well, that I would predict is going to significantly drive which of those resources probably gets more investment in the next half decade than any other. And we can get into that. It has everything to do with artificial intelligence and data centers, which is kind of a big buzzword right now. So I think we'll see continued development of those resources and the infrastructure that supports it.
Yeah, and I think it's you hit on so many cool points there and summarized it very well for listeners to keep in mind that we're really lucky here in the United States of America. We've been able to develop a ton of different technologies and be able to just guaranteed when you wake up, you can turn on the light switch. And you can plan on going to school, you can plan on buying your food, and as a result, America keeps prospering and prospering. And it wasn't because we decided that there's only one way. We said, let's go figure this out. And I feel like that's where we're at in the energy space now, like acknowledging that we need energy, period. Mm-hmm. And so now we can discuss what sources can we use to obtain energy that still accomplishes these things. And oh, by the way, how can we ensure other countries around us have that same opportunity? I think, there's when COVID hit, April 2020, specifically when oil prices went negative, I had a banker on the East Coast call me, who I hadn't talked to in several years, and he's like, what are you going to do? Did you just see oil prices went negative? And I told him, well, Caslin, a couple things. One is I actually don't sell oil for a living. I provide electricians, and we have really good electricians, and there's always a need for electricity. We do some other services as well. Secondly, we need oil, period, for a long time because this technology takes a long time to develop. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, all this technology is being developed. Technology may be the wrong word, but these energy sources are being figured out as to what's the best one to rely on and in what circumstances. The demand is growing extensively, and that's not going to go away. So I think either way, if you're in the energy space and you're willing to be flexible and adaptable, you have a voice and you have a really cool future in the energy industry. There should be nobody today saying that this is an energy I should get, or this is an industry I should get away from. Mm-hmm. The energy industry is dynamic, it's exciting, and we're just starting to scratch what's going to come down the pipe. I mean, I was just reading an article recently in the North Dakota about how they have these data centers coming in there and the amount of jobs and work and the amount of pressure that puts on the electric grid and all of the considerations can make your head spin. Mm-hmm. But at the end of it, you're like, wow, this is a spot for some really smart people to get involved because you can have a future, whether it's at LSC doing engineering, go out and do some cathodic protection, go out and do some coding. Mm-hmm. The world is wide open. Specific to Lake Superior Consulting, how are you going to stand out in the next 10 years? You told me you started a podcast. Tell me more about it.
So for me, it's really about getting the message out there. We started a podcast. It's not LSC. I'll call it LSC adjacent. We've got about 10 episodes recorded. I'm not sure when this will release, but it comes out Monday of this coming week. And so basically, my ambition is to educate, motivate, and hopefully entertain people or listeners and watchers to learn more. And not just about, it's called Manic Energy. So the name of the podcast is Manic Energy. That was sort of a play on, the landscape of energy, but also, I usually bring in energy to things, I'm told. So basically, I want to educate people about energy, but about business as well. And about life. It's not just about energy. It's about a lot more than just that. And my reason for that is because I'd like to attract a wide audience and, not just people that care about and understand, what energy is and how it's delivered and how they use it. But the people who don't care about that or maybe don't like it and still want to join and listen and learn something. And so I want to have different perspectives. I think it's really important to have differing opinions. To me, civil dialogue is really important, right? So I want to have that with a lot of different guests and we have a lot of people that, like I said, are smarter than me, and I'm looking forward to talking to them and learning from them. So,
Well, I'm looking forward to listening to the episodes because
but it'd be great to have you on. We can trade seats a little bit.
there we go. I think one of the things is just again going back to who's influential even in your life. You can dial into these podcasts and listen, and if you're willing, you can learn a lot. And maybe if my wife's grandpa always said, "Don't live a life of regret, live a life of experiences." And maybe one of the experiences I really think back to is like, why didn't I listen more to people around me about, hey, there's a curve coming up and this might be what it feels like, It's something, I don't know if it's just older age, it starts to creep in more where you're like, you talked about the parachutes around you, you're always like looking for some soft landings in case this happens. And that I didn't have that 20 years ago. That wasn't even a thing. Like, only great things were going to happen. There was no allowance for, and there was no thought put on, well, what if it didn't happen? It was like, no, it's going to happen. It's going to be great. And so I think there could have been maybe a little bit less stress in my life if I would have thought a bit more about the what ifs and how I would handle those. And certainly now we have those built into our business, and that comes from a couple downturns, right? I know, like this, what my break even is. I know where that is, and I know what levers I can pull if I start not meeting expectations. I have a lot of flexibility built in because we don't know when a client is going to pull a project in our space. We don't know when a project's going to award a project, or when a client is going to award a project in our space, and all of a sudden you have to man up. Both have an equal chance of happening, and you kind of got to build in a buffer in those. And possibly if I would have listened a bit more to somebody like yourself who had some experience, maybe I could have navigated those kind of challenges a little bit better. Net result, who cares? Here we are. But nowadays, people are listening to podcasts as a great way to get information. And when we started ours a couple years ago, it was really born from, as I'm sitting in Minneapolis in the airport looking around, like, what is everyone doing? They can't all be in a meeting while they're in the Minneapolis airport. And you start like poking around and asking people, and people aren't listening to the radio; they're listening to the podcasts because they get to dial into whatever floats their fancy that day. They can be on a run, they can get a little business motivated, they can go listen to a crime story, whatever their deal is. So I'm really excited that you guys are doing that. What about Lake Superior Consulting? What do you see, you guys? You mentioned you do engineering. I want to hear a little bit more about your other services and what you see the next 10 years you doing.
Yeah, some of our other services would be about, it's mostly around technologies that assess how effectively systems are working, or how effectively safety systems are working. So, without going into every single one of the service offerings entirely, we have a utility locate team. So if you can make that 811, call before you dig, or one call, we have a team that services some customers out of the Minneapolis area today that will go out and do that work. We've got a team that oversees assessment technology. We call it inline inspection tools, but systems that run through pipelines to make sure they're running safely or identify any problems there might be. We have a team that will help run those tools. We have a team that specializes in non-destructive testing. So if you have an asset that has a gouge, a dent, metal loss, we've got tools and technology to assess those conditions, and then an engineering team behind it to make recommendations, perhaps repair recommendations or directives. We mentioned corrosion control type coating, industrial type coating or commercial coating, advice, guidance, specification writing, recommendations. And so really a lot of services around asset safety and security. And so a lot of times that'll mean we're working around the country to do that, where we physically go and do work to assess those assets, retrieve information, and then provide engineering-based reports on what we learned. And so there's a real scientific aspect to it, right?
Yeah.
It's make a hypothesis, do some studies, review the results, assess those results in data, process that information, and then convert it back into a digestible format for the end user or our customer to inform them of the condition of their assets, and then also perhaps come up with ideas on how to make changes and then implement those changes and then test to make sure that the change worked.
And I got to think over the next 10 years as the energy landscape changes, really is irrelevant to you because no matter what, those services are needed.
It seems to go on continuously so far. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. A lot of the work we focus on is regulated, just like you see the scales for trucks, truckers or commercial vehicles on our highways and freeways. It's the same Department of Transportation that regulates the industry we most commonly service. And so, a lot of the things we do are required by law, and, our customers rely on us to augment their staff, because it wouldn't make sense probably in many cases for them to have people on full time.
Sure. So how many offices do you guys have?
So we have 2 offices in Duluth, Minnesota,
Okay.
our main office, and then another which is more of a field-facing office with a garage and warehouse. We have an office in Pittsburgh, an office in Omaha, an office in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Nashville, and Houston, Texas.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we've got that's where we have brick and mortar, but we have people. I'm not going to be accurate, but directionally accurate. I think we have people that work probably in about 27 or 28 states last time I looked. So we fully embrace the remote working, and have done our best to place employees nearer to our customers and their assets. And then some great folks who choose to live closer to family or somewhere else, and can still very effectively do their job and be engaged remotely.
That is just such an incredible story, and I can't believe the time has already gone that quickly, Ryan. But thank you for sharing Lake Superior Consulting's journey, but specifically yours, because I think there's the human aspect that's so important to put in front, because it's easy to think of like a larger business just winning and like, oh, well, yeah, they have all the resources, they just get to do it. Well, wait, there's actually a person who, collectively a team, a bunch of persons in there all doing their thing to get what is then born Lake Superior Consulting, with offices, if I counted correctly, 6 of them, maybe 7 brick and mortar places, operating in 20 plus states. And I know having a real voice at big, large companies that are really in charge of securing our energy future. And that's an incredible story. So thank you for sharing it.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure meeting with you and getting to talk to you. Appreciate it.
We'll have to keep in touch. Thank
Agreed.
you.